So welcome everybody. I try to speak completely normal. If I sound really weird, this is because this is my first time having this experience with the headphones. So our topic is today, how do we maximize the business value of our data? And some of the stuff will be really obvious if you hear it, but I think it makes sense to repeat it in the beginning. Maybe a little bit about me. I'm Petr Beles. I'm coming from Zurich, Switzerland. I'm working in data warehousing since the year 2000. I started with a big commercial bank doing Inman-style data warehouses. I was then head of data management for a phone company in Switzerland for several years. And I'm working now since 2010 for a company called Datavault Builder that I will tell at the end just 1 or 2 minutes what we're doing. So why are we managing our data? Why do we need to take care of our data? Because the data is in our source systems, we have many different IT systems, but what do we want to achieve if we talk about analytics, if we talk about finding information in the data that we have? And it's about creating business value, and it's very simple. There are two categories. One is we want to increase the revenue, or we want to lower cost, or a combination of this. We want to improve processes. So this is the main target. So we shouldn't work with the data if we don't know that it's for one of these targets, except we have some legal requirements and we need to build some reports that we don't want to do, but we need to because we are forced to. So in which way could we optimize the business value if we need to fulfill this information to increase revenue or reduce cost? One is early delivery. What does it mean? If we assume that the information we're creating has some value, the earlier we create the value, the more value we generate. And as this information usually doesn't create one-time value, it's really increasing over time the value it can generate. The second thing is, we need to do it in an efficient way. If I have a data team of 5 data engineers, if I give them the wrong tools, it will take them longer to create certain informations, and I will have less value. And the last thing is what many people forget in the beginning is to deliver the right things. And what are the right things? This is changing. It could be that maybe in September, October, there is a special need, business needs to know certain information, but end of the year happens, management needs to know some really important figures to close the year, so it could be that our priorities are changing. So we constantly need to reevaluate which kind of questions the business wants to have answered, and we need to have a process to accommodate for that we can change priorities while working with the data. So now we come to a level where we talk to technicians and they talk about agility, and the business says, I don't care about agility. Do whatever you do, but I need to get my information. And this is what we need to translate. Agility is one help to get the right deliveries, to change priorities if the business has different requirements, but we're reducing the so-called cost of delay. What is the cost of delay? This is this thing that if we deliver the right information later, the right decision is taken later, and we lose some cost-saving potential or some revenue. As well, automation to deliver something more efficient is just a means to reduce this kind of cost of delay, but it's not the goal in itself. So let's try to focus on which solutions could help us to achieve, to deliver the right things early in an efficient way. So let's put that in a model. And if we have here different approaches, maybe some manual coding that we could do, it generates some value, and we have some self-installed automation. If we can deliver early, the whole curve of business value is turning up, and this is really giving you a lot of stuff to work with. If we deliver the right stuff, it lifts up the curve of value generated. And if we deliver efficiently as well. And why is this necessary? If you start a new project in the data world and you don't deliver enough value at a certain point, it doesn't matter that you generate value if business doesn't perceive this as enough value, they might stop your project, they may stop your funding, they might redirect your budget somewhere else. So this is the thing that, in my opinion, we try to achieve early on, show the value that we're generating and delivering the right stuff in an efficient way. Simple. So how do we do that? One thing is right deliveries. We first need to understand what are the priorities of the business. We need to find a way to communicate with our business users in a very simple way and ask them what they need. And how do we do that? It's not about taking some very complex technical modeling approaches and try to teach them to use them, but we need to really limit it to a very simple language, talking about so-called core business concepts. So what do you do in your daily life? What is your process about? Let's try to maybe look on what they're bringing in, like their sales orders, giving them highlighters, and try a very simple way of that they can express what they need. The second thing is that if we already have implemented some kind of data loads and information for one department, we don't want to implement this stuff again and again. We want to reuse what we have. So we need to have a documentation of our inventory. This is our advertising material that we have. So yes, if we have a very simplified data model, we can use that to communicate to the user and say, look, this is what is already there. This is what we already have prepared but not implemented. And what do you need now? And let's omit the application. So for me, a business data model, a very, very simplified one, is a means for communication with the business to reduce the cost of delay, that we do the right stuff and we don't do it, we do it only once. The second thing is this network effect, and I explain this on the next slide. If I have a fully automated approach that translates my business model into a working solution, adding something to my data model takes always the same effort. And we have now the experience, if we do it the right way, even after 13 years, adding one more element to our enterprise data model that we haven't created upfront, but we're creating it step by step based on business priorities, takes the same effort. And sorry for this resolution. I don't know what happened when I sent the presentation here. But the value of the network that we have created in the enterprise data model is increasing exponentially, because now we can get more and more use cases and extract the data based on this. So why does this fail very often? I have seen two reasons. One is that people try to do an enterprise-wide data model upfront. That was in the beginning when I started working in the year 2000. And it took us months to complete what we want to achieve, to understand the business user needs. And it took us months to implement. The problem is 2 years later, when we had the perfect data warehouse, and I really worked on the project with a really cool technical solution, nobody wanted to use the data because the requirements of the business users changed in the 2 years since they gave us their input. So this is not working. So we need to really go step by step, extend it, adapt it constantly. So we need to have as well a way that is not blocking us. And early approaches of this kind of working were not taking into consideration change, because we had like 20 years the same IT systems. That's not the case anymore. We need to react to input changes very quickly. So for legal requirements, there is not much discussion. If there is like some GDPR reporting or some carbon gas emission reporting, we just need to do it. So we want to reduce the effort that we have to a minimum to fulfill this legal requirement, deliver what is required, but not spend too much time so we can go back to the business value. So if I put it in my target, if I'm working on the project, it's what gives me value is delivering the right stuff and the efficient delivery and the early delivery. Yes, we need to do the legal requirements as well. And on the cost side, it's the complexity of creating a solution, doing the stuff with data that we need. And this is driving like the cost of data management if we don't do it efficiently. So what does mean data management? And I'm still taking a model and saying, okay, a data warehouse is not much different from what a normal warehouse is. So we are getting the information from somewhere, we need to store it. We need to know where the stuff is stored, we need to know where the dangerous goods are stored, which is our PII sensitive information maybe. And if you look at normal business, you need to advertise what you have, you need to sell it, you need to deliver it to the people, you need to look that the right people are getting the right products and all of that. And this is exactly what the data warehouse would be about. And just bear with me for one more minute. Some people here will say, yeah, that's why we're not doing a data warehouse. And I agree with you. But let's see how we get there. And a data warehouse is even more complicated. We have historical data sources, we have data delivery problems. We need to update the physical implementation because the database technology changes. We need to log everything. We need to split the development over many developers, maybe if we have bigger projects. But it comes all down to what Bill Inman already in the 1980s was saying about the subject-oriented, non-volatile, integrated time-varying collection of data in support of management's decisions. So why don't you do that? Very simple. Because it's not really working in many cases. So why do this kind of projects that want to create this kind of solutions that we really can consume the information that we need in a very simple way? And happily, some people worked on that, and there are some Forbes reports, but most of them are very similar to other findings. Is the problem that we're solving here is very complex. Even we maybe don't see it in the beginning. We don't want to see it. We want to reduce the complexity, and this makes it expensive. But even if we see the complexity of the problem, many people try to solve a technical problem. If you talk about ETL tools, if you're creating about data pipelines, it's a technical thing you're doing. You're not yet concentrating on creating the business value. And main thing, as I mentioned, if you don't deliver value early enough, if it takes you weeks or months to set up your architecture, to set up your naming standards, your business users get bored, they don't get information, and they might stop your project if you have a sponsor in the business. So what can we do to solve this problem? So let's assume that we want to create this integrated data source that answers all our questions. So which approaches were invented in the past years to get there in a simpler way? One is do less. What does that mean? The problem is complex, so let's solve only part of the problem, which makes it easier. Sounds like not the best idea, but it has a name. And please don't get me wrong, I have no issues with data lakes. It's just a data lake alone, without fulfilling the other parts in the middle that we have seen, of organizing your data, creating an ontology, advertising which data you have, is not solving all of the problem. And this doesn't mean that data lakes are bad as such. No, there are a lot of data lakes that fill these parts in the middle with their own processes, with some guidance for the developers how to do it. But the chance is, in such approach is that if you push just the responsibility for all this kind of ontology creating, advertising, loading, cleansing, integrating data to the report layer, your good data engineers will solve it. And they will solve it in a good way. But if you have 10 reports, you have maybe 8 times solved the same problem in different loads, and the maintenance can become a nightmare. I relate, that's a serious story. I worked for an insurance business. They went into data science and they gave 10 data scientists the task to create some solutions. 10 of them defined the concept of the customer. They had 10 good definitions of the customer, but they were different. And that created a really big mess. So why doesn't it pay off to just do nothing in this middle part? And it goes back to Bill's Inman chart, and I simplified it a little bit. He showed already 20 years ago, and is still showing it even today in his presentations, is if you have a certain number of different IT systems, and that's the reality in most companies today, and you have a certain number of recipients, if everybody needs to connect to everybody, the complexity is growing exponentially. So that's why we should still create some integrated system to take care of these different functions that we need to do to prepare the data to be consumed in a very simple way. So let's do that. Why don't we do that? And some people came up with the idea, no, that's still too complicated. Let's try to do it a little bit simpler. Let's put the responsibility from the central data team just down to the data domains. And I'm, again, not complaining about data mesh. Samak Degani solved a lot of important aspects how you can do a decentralized development of your data management, and I value her book a lot. But as well, in this approach, she described like the shared governance. She described how infrastructure should deliver certain functionalities to different teams, but still how to make sense of your data, how to create the ontology. This part is missing. And it doesn't mean that you can't fill it in. There are, like in Switzerland, Roche Diagnostic, and they have then data vaults built in between, and they're using this approach, and there's a lot of good stuff in it. But again, it's not solving yet everything. So we need to fill in this middle part somehow. And just to see here this graphic, so yes, we reduce the complexity by splitting it up into smaller bits. Yes, the exponential factor of complexity was reduced, but still, if we would have integrated systems for storing the data and for the ontology, it still would be more efficient. So, what is another approach? People say, yes, but we are doing the same stuff again and again. We're copying the data to one place, we're creating history, we're creating relations between the stuff, so let's automate that. And that's a very good idea. Or you have some consultants that create an automation solution for you. So how does this look like? So instead of trying just to omit the thing in the middle and leave it to some people on their own, let's create a standardized solution in the middle that solves this kind of problem. And why do you need to create your own solution? The argument I hear the most often is, we are special. Our company is different than other companies. And that's true, otherwise you wouldn't be in business, as you're serving certain needs on the market. But you need to differentiate probably between on your business processes and maybe your source systems, and if you are special in the way how you manage your data. If you're Facebook, if you're Google, potentially yes. If data management, BI and reporting is a support process for your main business processes, then maybe not. Then you maybe can really use the approach where patterns that other people have invented can be reused because they have some experience, they have already run into a lot of problems. So let's see how this could look like. Usually you would look at this problem with all the different tasks that you potentially need to do. And now let's split that up and say, there are tools that help me to stage my data. There are some patterns in the open source space available that can create this kind of historization logic. There are some tools taking care of the access to the data, and we could maybe create a web page to advertise which data we have. And let's leave out this data governance part for later. We will solve that, but not now. We need to get live and stuff like that. The problem is, if we start like this and we start combining many different solutions, we go on one side in the right direction. We are splitting now. That's what makes your company special, the products you're building and selling, and the approach of solving how we treat our data into two different topics. And here we use then some standardized approach, some tools that exist on the market, but we create a new problem. By using several tools that we need to combine, your data management teams becomes a software development team. We call it the two-project problem. So you have one project that tries to create this business value that we talked about in the beginning, and that's why I highlighted that. And the second project is about creating your solution. You need to have an architecture, you need to have documentation, you need to have training, you need to create your stuff, you need to make it operational. This is classical software development. And one of my teachers that I highly value will teach me is, if you look at a software project, creating something new is about 10% of the effort that you invest in the life cycle of your software. So if you're looking only on this development part of creating your data pipelines, this is 10% of what it will cost you in the long run. And maybe it's 15, maybe it's 12%, I don't know, but that it will be a multiple of what you invest there. You can already reserve the budget for maintenance, for documentation, for training new team members, for sure. So the question is how we can get around this. And let's first see what are the benefits of this kind of solution is. If we use here a lot of open source parts that we're combining, yes, potentially we will not pay too much license costs, but we're focusing on technology. We're starting to create a software developer team instead of a business analyst team. We're building something that other companies have built. You're creating a unique combination of tools that you need to document, operate, train people on. You need to define all the interfaces between all these different tools, and this increases the cost of delay. And if we go back, really do the calculation for yourself, assuming just some random numbers for business cases that your data is producing in value, and just calculate that you deliver 1 month earlier instead after like 6 months, after 5 months and stuff like that, and see in comparison to how much you could save here by just really saving on license costs would bring you. It is still, you will probably not cover everything because you don't have the time in the beginning, you don't have the resources, and potentially you don't know all the problems that are waiting for you. And this increases the risk in the long term. And additionally, there will be a lot of maintenance work over time because this kind of solutions live for 10 and 15 or 20 years, and you need to update it to current technology. So if you repeat that, we would have one benefit here, saving license costs if you take this approach, but a lot of costs created. So I come back to one question. Usually if I say, if we assume that my claim that data management is not a simple task to do, and is maybe as complex as your enterprise resource planning, which of your companies has coded their ERP themselves? And I once took the potential client and they did that, but it was one company in 20 years. Today, even SAP is expensive, and maybe people know the downsides of SAP still. A lot of companies use SAP because still, in the end, it gives you so much more value, it takes out risk, that it pays off. So if you don't have coded your ERP yourself, why should you code your own solution in the data management space? Because potentially there were no solutions in the past. So today, you have the option from many manufacturers getting off-the-shelf automation. And what does it mean? It's the same approach as we had before. So we are doing still all the stuff, but we're splitting between configuration, and we have automation tools that are covering all of this function, covering the full life cycle of the solution. Does this exist? No. There is no magic bullet. You still need to combine maybe 2 or 3 solutions. You need to get a database, maybe automation solution. But my point is, let's try to get in this direction as much as possible. The less tools involved in this process, the less problems I get. The less I am a software company, the more I can concentrate on business output. And this is mainly my message today in saying, yes, first thing, always start with the business requirement. Try to capture it. Try to do data models out of it in a very simplified way, not in a technical way, to gather the requirements, what you want to achieve on the top. And then, instead of using coding something, creating pipelines manually, use some kind of automation. And I don't care if you use our competitor solution, it will still be better than if you create it yourself. So if you compare this now to creating your own automation, what is the big downside? Is you will pay license cost. There is no open source solution covering all these different functionalities of data management today. I'm not saying in the future, but today that's not. So you will pay license costs, but by using this kind of solutions, you don't need to create your own architecture, you don't need to create your own trainings in best case, but validate that, and you can start delivering value immediately. So this is my recommendation. If you're looking for a new solution, try to take this as a goal to go in a direction. And there is no magic bullet, but try to get as close as possible. And as I told you in the beginning, I will just say now in 1 or 2 minutes what we are doing, and then I'm open for questions. So how we have interpreted now this approach is that we say, really, we want to go from the source system, integrate data, historize data, harmonize data, document data quality problems in one solution. Because if we have one solution, you don't need to integrate several products, but still, your company is special, so we allow the configuration of your business processes within our tool. And this is the difference. So you don't code your stuff, but based on the business requirements, it will implement the data flows. It will create a data pipeline in a very standardized way. What is the downside? You will not create your own solution. So it could be, as I say, if you're Facebook or Google, maybe this standardized way is not fitting you, but let's be honest, in the past 40 years, many data modelers, maybe data engineers wrote literature how to do stuff that is working. Is there only one way as it is working? No, but there are ways that are working and some ways that are not working, and this kind of stuff you can automate. And the result is that we can start in week 1 delivering value. Will we deliver a full enterprise data model? No, we will not, but that's the point what I mean. We go through all the layers from source to destination, production ready. We replace a lot of tools that we don't have the complexity of training people on many tools. The data models are converted in real time into working code, which helps us to give feedback to the business users immediately what the effects of data model changes are. And it allows you, by having really this kind of simplified visualizations to business users about business terms and not about like table names, column names, stuff like that. Or let's put it in a different way. Yale tried this kind of approach and compared it to many other approaches, and they came up that using the business-driven approach with automation, with our solution, is like being 4 times faster than the next best comparable solution they had. And this here is our main figure that we're aiming for, is how much successful projects you finish in the first 6 months. Some of them finish a little bit later, that's fine, but we're assuming if you're finishing your first deliveries within the first 6 months, then you're safe, then you didn't hit the wall, and you can continue your project into the future. And this is a study by Bark Institute in Germany that came up that we're doing that in a very, very high success rate by following these principles. Still, it's not about just following these principles. With our tool, you could use any other tools, but just main message today is focus on business value, talk to the business users, what are their priorities, create a solution that can react to that, and try to automate your implementation. Thank you a lot.